A follow-up from last week or
yesterday. We're going to do it
Wait,
today.
hold on, right?
A follow-up in
Wait,
our
hold on.
timeline for
Yes.
once last week. In
Your
you
timeline,
listener timeline, I mean,
it could have been 5 minutes ago.
instantaneous. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is part 2. So encouragement, if you have not listened to the Harry and Harriet Moore part 1, that is the precursor to this one. So encouragement to go listen to that first. It's pretty integral to also at least 15% of this podcast is me clarifying with Heather if I'm saying the word correctly. I apologize. My friends know that I have like this silly little thing where I just say the wrong words all the time. And it's like, no, that's not it. That's not the right word. Like, it sounds close enough, whatever. So anyways, we are encouraging you to go listen to the first episode or first part. Part 2, we're going to focus solely on historical context, educational content, and I encourage all of you listening to, if you need to take a break, this is some pretty heavy hitting stuff. And I was really intentional with the way that I laid it out. And I'm hoping that we can have an open and curious conversation in a way that still honors all of the people who have been brutalized by this terror, and also holding on to just how significant. I mean, when I got into this, it's wild. It's a wild ride. So I broke it up into different parts, different sections. I've encouraged Heather to ask me questions, and we're just going to kind of go with it and see what happens. And I can even see a world where in the future I do a different rendition of this, because there are many different offshoots, aspects. I can see a lot of what we talk about being intertwined in here, and kind of, I even imagined us in the future kind of taking maybe like an episode and seeing where all the little puzzle pieces fit together, and like adding some context to things and weaving everything together historically. Anyways, I could keep going on and on and on, but my point being, take some breaks if you want to, pause, reflect, come back. We encourage you to also ask questions amongst each other, to yourselves, to us, whatever. So, with that being said, we are going to go back yet again to the late 1800s.
Okay.
All right.
Here we go.
Let's go. So, even though some of you are probably hopping straight from the first part into the second part, I'm going to do a little recap for those of you who did take a break. In our first episode, we touched on the Ku Klux Klan and its impact just very briefly towards the end, but we mostly focused the episode on Harry and Harriet Moore. So they were 2 teachers and activists whose love and passion for their community became activism, and that activism ultimately cost them their lives. And their story anchors this 2-parter. So we're going to get into a little bit of why this episode exists. So before we get into all the historical context and the cultural context, we're going to take a step back to understand where the myth of white supremacy came from, how it was sold, built, and sanctified. And this isn't just history, it's also building this architecture of racial fear that still shapes a lot of our memory, both culturally, communally, as a country. And like I said in the front, this is heavy, but it is necessary. So before we get started, a reminder, this is a content/care note. So this episode discusses racism, organized white supremacist violence, religious nationalism, and state complicity. I will not be providing any graphic details, but the subject matter itself is pretty heavy, especially for those who are Black, Indigenous, and other listeners who are people of color who carry the lived and inherited weight of this history. So please, again, like I said in the beginning, take your time, pause, rest. And if you want to listen alongside someone else, I encourage that too. Also, if you are someone who is not a person of color, encouraging to sit with the unsettled sensations. And, if you need to pause and step away, that's okay. But sitting with the discomfort, I think, is really important. So in the show notes, we'll also share some resources for continued reflection, education, and also some community care content in there too. Okay, so we're going to, you and I have spent a lot of time in the late 1800s.
Yes.
And
yes.
I just think that is so important. I don't yet know What? Why? How?
Well, and I was going to say it's probably because, like the US isn't that old and but I'm like, but we haven't just been in the US.
Mm-mm.
Like we've scooted around,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Just a little quip,
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the origin of the Ku Klux Klan first, and then we're going to take a little adventure away from the timeline and then come back. So we are in the post-war era. So the Confederacy had fallen. So this is post-Civil War, and there were about 4 million people who were formerly enslaved, now free. So Black men were voting, serving in legislatures, building schools, and founding churches. The white South faced economic collapse and crisis of its identity. So the formation of the KKK was in 1865. 6 ex-Confederate soldiers in Pulaski, Tennessee, formed a quote unquote social club, and it was named the Ku Klux Klan.
So off the bat, that's what they called it.
Yes, and guess what? We have no idea why they named it that.
Huh.
No idea. There is no further content. It's just like that's what they named it. It's like, okay.
All right.
So, the original rituals were intentionally absurd. They included costumes, code words, mock oaths, but
Was it kind of like Masonic?
yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes. It replicated this brotherhood, kind of like men's social club
Yeah.
thing, right?
Okay.
With this absurdity, though, alongside it, which is really important to hang on to, just as a curiosity, because I have been sitting with what is it about absurdity that really allows it's like a conduit, like how does absurdity allow violence? But alongside this absurdity, they were terrorizing people of color. They were humiliating them, they were antagonizing them. So they realized that the fear that their disguises produced was actually doing something. Like these costumes that they
So
wore.
they started, you may have said that and I missed it. My cat was busy knocking everything off of my desk. So they started with the absurd sort of rituals and stuff, but also with the hoods and the.
No. I don't know what visuals there are. I cannot find any visual representation.
But they were wearing something.
They were
that
wearing
was
costumes
creepy.
of some kind that were instilling fear, and they were then, as a result, terrorizing people. It was like, it almost had this nature of scaring, antagonizing. It feels very much so like, what's the right word?
Well, anytime a costume is worn in a non-costume scenario, it is inherently creepy.
Yes.
Like the kids that were just in Virginia at that like widow's house in their Halloween costumes trying to break in.
Right.
And like very The Strangers vibes.
Yes.
We don't need to do all the theatrics. It's
and
scary
you're
enough that you're trying to break
your identity.
in.
Yeah, you're concealing your identity. You're in this state of also I'm thinking about like if we're talking about like your lizard brain, like anything that is close enough to like a human face but isn't quite a human, it all automatically is just like terrifying. So they then realized that what they were doing was instilling actually a lot of fear in people of color, and they became a terror network based off of basically being opportunistic and being like, oh wait, we're actually terrorizing people, this is working.
Where are we?
We're in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So thinking about how all of these freed people of color are out here trying to build community. They're trying to do things like vote. They're trying to...
Yeah, and which, make no mistake, even without the Klan being there, free did not mean that they just were like, oh, sure, hey, cool, awesome, we're so glad you're here. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
You're already up against communally
Everything.
and societally a lot.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this group, this very small group, social club, was to restore white control by destroying Reconstruction and suppressing Black political participation.
So basically, to have to just go back to slavery without owning slaves.
That is exactly what we're talking about. So, targeting freed people, teachers, and Republican officials with intimidation, torture, and murder. So it escalates real quick, right? And it's not that it even escalated, it was always that escalated. It's always been that violent,
Yeah.
and they just got together. So violence was justified as defenses of civilization. So this is
Oh my God. Okay.
So this is kind of where we're starting. This is the starting point. Okay. And so we're going to just really, there are many different renditions of the KKK, and this is just the first one. So the federal response to this, Congress passed the Enforcement Acts of 1870 and 1871. So this whole little social club situation happened between 1865 and 1871. This was the first rendition of the Ku Klux Klan. So they, by the mid 1970s, the Klan as an organization was dismantled. But its ideology of white grievance had already rooted deeply. So this federal response and this, Congress passing this act, the outlaw terror simply shifted into local law enforcement and political office. So this act basically was like, oh, you can't publicly do this. So the first Klan,
keep it on the down low, please.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to get involved.
We don't have to get involved. Exactly. So the Klan died on paper, but the story it told about white victimhood lived on. So before we go any further and we get any more into the timeline, so before we pick back up and talk about the second rendition and the rebirth and kind of like where it led, we're going to talk about three things. The first one is going to be America's first blockbuster movie. The second is going to be the country's largest Confederate monument, which you probably know and have heard of and maybe even been to because, shocker, I have. And three, the ideological movement that began almost immediately after the Civil War, which kept the flame of the KKK alive throughout history and even into today. So some ideological stuff, the movie, Confederate Monument. First, we're going to talk about the movie. The end of the last episode, I asked you, have you ever heard of The Birth of a Nation?
Right, and I said no.
So this was a movie filmed and released in 1915.
1915? 1-5?
Yes.
Okay.
1-5. So a director by the name of D.W. Griffith, based this movie on Thomas Dixon Jr.'s novel, The Klansman, a historical romance of the Ku Klux Klan.
Sorry?
Dixon wrote this book as a quote-unquote defense of the Anglo-Saxon civilization and a plea for white unity. Okay.
Oh,
yeah. Yes, yeah. You are going to lose your mind. I cannot believe this. Okay. So Griffith, the son of a Confederate officer, saw himself as a moral storyteller preserving Southern memory. So the film's tagline was the story of the birth of a nation. The nation was not America. It was the white South reborn through violence.
Yeah, I was putting that together in real time.
Yeah. So here's what the film shows. I want to put an intentional note here that we talked about this in episode 1. I cannot and have not been able to acquire.
I was going to ask.
I have not, no movement has been made there. No movement has happened as far as being able to find Harry T. Moore's PBS documentary about him and his wife, Harriet.
Is this when you tell me, though, that you did watch The Birth of a Nation?
Oh, no, I didn't watch it, and I will not be watching it. But if you look it up,
easy to find.
Oh my God. You can find it on YouTube. It's like 4 hours long is what I saw on the YouTube clip. Yeah, it is. When I tell you it's accessible, I don't even want to say it's accessible because I don't want to encourage people to go watch this shit. But also, super important here. I don't know, hey, take it with what you will. It's accessible, but Harry T. Moore's documentary, educational documentary, is not. So, anyways, I digress. So, we're going to briefly touch on what this film shows. It is two families, one Northern, one Southern. They lived through the Civil War and the Reconstruction. The Black characters in the film are mostly played by white actors in blackface and are portrayed as These are how they are depicted. Lustful, ignorant, dangerous, incapable of self-government, and that they symbolize chaos and a threat to white order. There is this really incredible documentary about the KKK that I will link in the show notes that I watched. It's a two-parter where they describe how the film depicted people of color and depicted the Ku Klux Klan as
Like
these
heroes.
saviors, like these white saviors. And it's all about this almost like restoring peace and harmony stuff. So the film's climax shows the white vigilantes who form the KKK to save white womanhood and restore. The Klan rides to the rescue. The film fades out while white families praying under the cross. Peace is restored, and that's how the film ends. Now, we're going to pause there.
Does it at least have like a really bad Rotten Tomatoes rating?
I didn't even look it up. I don't know.
Okay.
Who knows? I have no idea. Now I want to go look. But we're going to get into the rest of it later, but that's the birth of a nation. We're going to get into it right now.
It's later. What she meant was
It's
after
later.
she takes a breath.
Right now. Yeah. So obviously this film is propaganda. The cinematography shows sweeping shots, heroic camera angles, emotional orchestration. The music is incredibly important here. The lighting, the way that this movie is filmed, all of these things directionally and how it was done are extremely important. So the moral framework here uses Christian imagery and uses this concept of light for the Klan. So I think it's important to just go ahead and name here that like I stated at the end of the last episode, the KKK was not inherently religious. When it first started, it had no ties to Christianity, had no Protestantism, there was no connection. This is where we see that happen.
Of course.
Yes.
Okay.
So the emotional manipulation pin here is that there is now sympathy for white suffering and fear and disgust towards people of color and Black freedom. So the end title card says, the former enemies of North and South are united again in defense of their Aryan birthright. That is literally what it says on the last card. Here is where it gets absolutely insane. This film premiered in February of 1915, and it was screened at the White House for President Woodrow Wilson and his cabinet. Wilson's
But am I understanding correctly?
Yes.
That now I understand the whole Aryan part of that.
Sure.
But am I understanding correctly that it's saying that even the North now has to agree
that they inherently do? This film, Heather, takes a national stage, and when I tell you it goes from coast to coast, it is across the country.
Well, okay. So I don't want to tangent too much here.
Please do.
But I am not surprised because I guess it's not even triangulating myself. I'm just going to fully just say that I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Because are you familiar with the massacre that happened here in 1898?
Mm-hmm. I've heard of it. I don't know the details, but I do know.
So for anyone not familiar, about like 2,000 white supremacists led a coup. And it was really just because they didn't like that the local government was biracial. That was not okay.
Yes.
And they did not like that the man that ran the local newspaper was Black. And so they burned down that building. They set lots and lots of fires. I mean, parents were brutally assaulted in front of their children. It was like, I think the numbers I think are probably on the higher end of the estimates, but it was like anywhere from 50 to over 300 Black men were murdered. And this was a time where it was so racially horrible here that we don't get into graphic stuff on our podcast, so I'm not going to start now. But I will just say that there were very violent signs if you were to just take a walk through certain parts of Wilmington. Yeah. And it's interesting because there's a fantastic book that I read called Wilmington's Lie, The Murderous Coup of 1898 and the Rise of White Supremacy. It was published in 2020. It's by David Zucchino. It's dense. It's big. I read it. It's depressing as all hell, but it's very, very good and very detailed and very important, because as I have a feeling you're going to get into a lot with the rest of this story, there are a lot of people who would like to say, no, that's not really what happened, or no, it was really overly, dramatized, or oh, blah, 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 blah. And thankfully, some things have had to be righted by history, and even some of the historic signs that have been put up finally call it what it was. But yeah, it was. But my point and where I went with this tangent was that Tennessee, North Carolina, we're not far apart. 98 to 1915, not a big gap of time. No. So it's all making sense that like so many of these things are happening. All of this heinous violence is happening, and it's just sort of making its way up the East Coast, right? And so I'm not surprised that in DC, it's like, oh, this looks like a fine film for us to watch tonight at the White House.
And that it doesn't help that Griffith and Wilson were friends. Like they were acquaintances. I don't know what degree, but they were. Now, am I a historian? No. We're sharing a lot of historical content on this podcast, as always. I just find it interesting. I'll say that, okay? Just super interesting. And I'll keep it there. Just, get curious about why the president was buddies with a guy who made the birth of a nation. So, speaking of Wilson, he reported his praise for the film after watching it. And he said that it was like writing history with lightning.
Ew. What?
Yeah. So it symbolized federal validation of racist propaganda. And Wilson had resegregated federal offices and justified it as restoring harmony. So the film became a mass cultural event, and over 200 million tickets were sold worldwide. Inflation adjusted number, by the way. $200 million in today's money worth of tickets were sold worldwide. Good. And again, worldwide. Okay. Churches hosted screenings, and politicians used it for fundraising. Why not? So following the screening, there were, as you can imagine, in multiple cities, riots and lynchings. Ugh. The NAACP protested, organized boycotts and lawsuits. Their campaign marked one of the first national efforts to confront media racism head on. And it wasn't history. It was advertising white supremacy, and it worked. So that is the very important cultural context of the birth of a nation. We're going to move on to a shrine, if you will, of the Confederacy. Heather, have you been to Stone Mountain?
In Georgia? Well, I have been to a hotel in Stone Mountain in Georgia because it's where the police had to escort me out. Yeah, but that's, I think, as far as I've actually made it there, because my life was in danger and I haven't really made it a point to go back.
We are going to tap into what can be deemed as a rebirth ceremony of sorts. So we've talked a little bit about the movie. Now, how does this then catapult into the second rendition of the KKK? That is our touchstone and where we're at. We're going to talk a little bit about Stone Mountain itself. It's like an offshoot. So on Thanksgiving night, November 25th of 1915, William J. Simmons, a Methodist minister and former fraternal organizer, led 16 men to a summit on the top of Stone Mountain, Georgia. They carried a flag, a Bible, a sword, and a burning cross, an image lifted directly from the birth of a nation. So to answer your question from our first episode, where did the burning symbolism of the burning cross from? Its roots are in Scottish, Anglo-Saxon, very non-based in violence. Their burning of a cross exemplified and symbolized a message, a form of messaging or communication, and it never had anything to do with a depiction of violence. And it was seen as like a way of like a communal communication. It had nothing to do with anti-Black symbolism. It had nothing to do with racism, but they, just like many things, co-opted this symbol. They use it in the movie, and then because it was used in the movie, they started using it in real life. So I know. I'm towing
Cool.
this. I towed this line the whole time between, and again, like that pin of absurdity, and like just like so fucking lame. Like it's so lame, you know?
I'm for anyone that's like Heather's not listening to Jerry. I'm just looking at stills from Birth of a
Of the birth
Nation
of it.
while I listen because I'm
Mhm.
like,
I was gonna send
mm-hmm.
you pictures. I totally forgot. But
No,
yeah,
it's fine.
yeah. So the image is lifted directly from the Birth of a Nation, and they declared at the top of Stone Mountain that the invisible empire had been reborn. Simmons issued a proclamation.
Relax.
This is why this is so important. It's like the level of fear, and we were talking about like if something doesn't directly exemplify everything we talk about on this podcast of belief and fear, this is like the ultimate manifestation of that.
I want to say that um, the Klansmen outfits in this movie, it looks like they're wearing plungers on their heads, and I like that. And I
So,
just come back to, and I said it last time.
mm-hmm.
If you are afraid, because it is fear, if you are afraid that a Black man or a Black woman, or I mean, honestly, anyone of color, but I feel like they're the most targeted by this specific group of people.
Mm-hmm.
If you are afraid that they will be
Especially at this
able,
time, I
yes,
think that's important. At this time, the era we're in right now, it is still directly targeted towards Black men and women.
right. If you're afraid that group of people is going to be able to do what you and your people can do, what oh, maybe what you're doing is a problem. Like, you know what? I just
Yeah.
like I cannot wrap my mind around
Mm-hmm.
this idea. Well, and I guess it's good. It's good that you and I aren't sitting here finding logic in this. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing. But I just feel out of my mind that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that was not a super coherent thought, but it was one that I had to say out loud.
Yeah, like this level of not being able to understand oppression.
Yes, like why is this your
Mm-hmm.
whole personality? Why do you have to just find
So
hatred?
this is really important because what you're hinging on right now, why, what, that's going to be our third like ideological grounding point in that what the narrative was that helped fuel the oppression and just the concept in general that there is this fear around white people losing their power.
Well, yeah, and yes, because even like with the Wilmington coup,
Mm-hmm.
one of the kind of like the final straws that incited all these white Looney Tunes to go crazy was that the newspaper that I mentioned published an article just sort of trying to like stop with the
Mm-hmm.
stereotypes against Black men.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point with like Birth of a Nation and all this, it's all just this stereotypical, like, oh, they're so dangerous.
Yes.
Well, you guys are the ones out here doing violence against
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
But mhm.
So Simmons issued a proclamation after this declared rebirth of the KKK that the Klan was now a holy order of white men bound together in Christian faith and Americanism.
Like Knights of the Round Table.
Mm-hmm. So, Stone Mountain had long been a site of Confederate memorials and veterans' reunions. So, this was like a well known place where they gathered. The United Daughters of the Confederacy proposed a massive carving as a permanent tribute to the Confederacy. Sculptor Gutzon Sculptor Gutzon Borglum, who would later design Mount Rushmore, was known as a Klans member, and he was the project's first artist.
Do more people know that?
Did you know that? I knew this because I've done research on Stone Mountain before, but I don't think that this is a very well-known thing.
No, I didn't know that the guy
Yeah.
who made Mount Rushmore
It's a Klansman.
was a Klansman.
Something to just roll, just a marble of curiosity to roll out there. The carving featured Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson, the literal canonization of Confederate generals. So Stone Mountain became a spiritual homeland for the reborn Klan. So this was the resurrection, if you will. Cross burnings and initiation rituals were held there for decades. The monument's revival in the 1950s during the backlash to Brown versus the Board of Education linked Confederate nostalgia to segregationist politics. And the carving was completed and dedicated in 1972 under Georgia's segregationist governor, Lester Maddox. I would like to add here, I have been to Stone Mountain twice. The first time, for those of you who don't know, have never been to Stone Mountain, which, first of all, why the fuck would you go? Well, maybe because you're in high school and you take a chorus trip with your Southern Baptist high school, and you go and you visit Stone Mountain because they have things like laser shows and family weekends and this big, huge, giant lawn where you hang out and you can see the carving of Stone Mountain. And it's like this, it's almost like a quasi theme park in a way, where you go, there's like places to eat, and there's
Like
very
snow
communal.
tubing. Like I remember the
Yes.
commercials for Stone Mountain. It was very like
Exactly.
family friendly.
Family. Super family friendly.
Super white family friendly.
Super white family friendly. Obviously, me at 17 years old, I had no clue. Like, as we said in the first episode, if you'd asked me who won the war back then, the Civil War, I would have probably had no clue. So me stepping into Stone Mountain, like, oh, this is so cool, la 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 la, whatever, had no idea. And then again in college, I went when I was a little bit older, probably like 19-ish. And yet again, I went back because it was like we were in Georgia for some reason, and not for some reason, or whatever. We were there, and someone mentioned going hiking. So it was like around there, you can go hiking, and then we were going to go to the lawn and whatever, we'll see this laser show. Again, at no point did I think to myself, what is this carving on this mountain? I had nowhere does it say. I'm sure it said something about the Confederacy, but yet again, I'm steeped in that, right? That's just normal to me at the time. The way that I found out about Stone Mountain was someone else was talking about it, I think on a podcast, and had mentioned something about its roots. And I was like, what are they talking about? And I had looked it up on my own, and I was like, what are you talking about? I've been to this place. I had no idea. I had no idea that that's what it was rooted in. And then that's how I found out about like Mount Rushmore and everything. So and then I had to like a whole deep dive in a project on Stone Mountain and Mount Rushmore. So the lasting symbolism from Stone Mountain is that it's the largest Confederate monument in the whole entire world, which is just crazy. And it's definitely many times has it been brought to the attention, like it's been brought into like, activists and stuff have over many years advocated for it to be removed. And the site has hosted Klan rallies into the 1980s, and it remains contested ground. So for white nationalists, it represented heritage. For others, it is this huge scar and stain, and a reminder that America literally carved its lie into stone. So that's Stone Mountain. Now we're going to move on to the third kind of pin here. Have you ever heard the phrase "the lost cause"?
I mean, only said like as a lost cause. Yeah.
So this ideological movement called the Lost Cause began almost immediately after the Civil War, and it was created by former Confederates and their sympathizers to reframe defeat from losing the war as dignity and slavery as benevolence. So it wasn't just nostalgia, it was a narrative of control. So now we're going to get into the core beliefs and the myths of the quote-unquote lost cause. I am going to reiterate here that these are beliefs and myths. Number one, that the war was not about slavery, but it was about states' rights. This rewording allowed for white Southerners to avoid confronting the moral violence of slavery and claim this kind of civic nobility. Number two, enslaved people were quote unquote loyal and quote unquote content. You've heard this.
Yeah, we've all heard that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This lie softened the horror of slavery and recast enslavers as benevolent guardians who were just doing this. Whatever.
Guardians. Wow, that's a term.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Number three, the Confederacy fought honorably against overwhelming odds. So this defeat was turned into this martyrdom. The South lost, but supposedly it retained its moral superiority. And our fourth and final point, figures like Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis were romanticized. They were depicted as tragic heroes, almost saintly, in murals, textbooks, and eventually even in movies. So, how did this concept and ideological movement of the lost cause spread? Through women's organizations like the United Daughters of the Confederacy, or the UDC, who funded the monuments, rewrote school books, and built memorial culture. So they were the ones that really depicted through art and monument this lost cause concept.
Which makes sense. I mean, because I'm assuming that these are all of their husbands and sons and brothers, right? And they're just trying to support them. And
well, they can't do anything else. So
certainly not.
So through churches and sermons, which framed the Confederacy's fall as a divine testing and not more a reckoning. Through literature and film, notably, as we've mentioned, The Birth of a Nation, which translated all of these myths into a visual spectacle. And through education, where public school curricula in the South and many northern states adapted the lost cause language into the 20th century.
I'm trying to think of what I could equate this to, because I'm having trouble with my little baby brain understanding how this is stupid. I mean, this is stupid to the point that I'm probably going to cut this out in editing, but I'm just saying this out loud as I'm processing. Like, I don't really get how a group of people can just be like, hey, I want to just have a little movement. But I mean, I guess that is what it is. Like, they're just trying to spark a movement, and then it just worked. I mean,
well, really, it's like it's opportunistic because everybody's already primed for this.
Yeah.
Like, there's the cognitive dissonance is already there. They were already justifying slavery through their actions. They were enslaving people and doing it anyways. So it really, what's so crazy too is when I was doing the notes for this, I thought to myself, that air in the South, this righteousness and superiority, you still feel that.
Sure. Yeah.
There's that sensation of like, I'm right and you're wrong. And it's like, this is the DNA makeup of that over time. So the psychological function of the lost cause, this ideological movement, served as an emotional armor for white Southerners who couldn't face the truth of their loss. It was a way to replace shame with pride. It turned defeat into destiny and accountability into persecution. That is why it endured. It met the same psychological needs that the Klan later exploited: belonging, moral certainty, and the illusion of victimhood.
Yeah, because it just keeps perpetuating this stereotype that, ooh, aren't black men so dangerous? Ooh, aren't black men so bad? Ooh, you don't want them around because if you have a white wife or a white daughter, like.
And there's also this air of, I have heard this before and I don't even like saying it, but this is something that I have heard as part of this lost cause, is that they were better off.
Oh.
Have you heard that before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it that again fuels exactly what you're saying, is like this concept of that things were better that way.
Well, here's the thing, everybody. This might be difficult to hear. It does not matter if perhaps there was a slave owner who was polite and respectful to their slave, because, hey, they were slaves and owners. And that in and of itself is not polite and not respectful. We don't keep people for pets. I don't know why that's so.
Yeah, this justification, this moral superiority is justification of, but I did it respectfully. That's literally not possible. It's like it fuels this cognitive dissonance. It's just, that's what it requires, cognitive dissonance, to think that this is some sort of like.
Well, because when you think about how you would say that, think about any other form of abuse, and now form a sentence of, yeah, XYZ happened to this person, but politely. Does it work?
Right.
It doesn't work.
It's more socially acceptable, and that's why it persists.
It's still, yeah, it doesn't work. Oof.
I love that we're in the era of that shit doesn't fly anymore. It does in certain cultures and contexts, in certain subsects and groups and stuff.
Well, I was just going to say this is going to be a really, I think, divisive episode for some people because,
Mm-hmm.
generationally, some people may be thinking like, oh, this is a problem, right? Everyone's so woke. This is what woke is.
I have
And
stated nothing but historical context. It's
well,
the
and
crazy part.
that's exactly what I'm saying is like the problem becomes when people fail to recognize that if we are in a timeline where people are acknowledging that something was wrong, and I'm not just talking about racism, right? I'm talking about anything. I'm talking about the fact that now if a man, smacks a woman on the bottom, that's a really big problem. That's assault, as opposed to like, oh, that's just old man what's his face.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a matter of now we're just so sensitive. This is a matter of I'm so sorry if that happened to you when you were young and you were told to overlook it.
Yeah.
That's also not okay.
Yeah.
Like you're allowed to look at it and go, should I be upset?
Yes.
And probably yes. You should.
Mm-hmm.
So carry on.
This monument shaped monument culture itself and the Confederate flag resurgence. It informed segregationist politics and the myth of heritage and not hate. And it continues. Yeah. Have you heard that before? Yeah.
The amount of T-shirts, the amount of flags, especially where you and I, got to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere, every house, a Confederate flag.
Indistinguishable from the American flag. Honestly, it's just
they usually flew one above the other.
Yeah,
and yes. Mm-hmm.
So it continues to echo in debates over critical race theory, curriculum bans, and the rewriting of American history. So this is where a lot of that contention comes in. So we've covered these three very significant things, right? So we're going to hop back into the continuation of the timeline here with all of this context of these very important three things, right? So the second rendition of the Klan, which we've stated and recognized was reborn on Stone Mountain from the birth of a nation and supported with this concept and ideological framing of the lost cause. So borrowing from Birth of a Nation, there's this imagery, the mountain ritual, right, where this is all kind of coming together. The membership peaked at this time between 1915 and 1930 at its highest between 4 and 5 million people, making it one of the largest social movements in U.S. history. Recruitment through Protestant churches, women's auxiliaries, and schools became commonplace. Their enemies at this point, so this is really important. So it then broadens from anti-Black ideology, and it spreads out to Catholics and Jews, immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe, feminists, labor unions, communists, and quote unquote loose women. Their slogan was the home, the church, the school, the flag. Their political reach, very significant here. Klan members held elected office in Indiana, Colorado, Oregon, Oklahoma, and beyond.
So you had to be white, Protestant, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like very committed to your faith. And a homemaker. Like you had to just be fruitful and multiply as a Protestant. Okay.
And be married. So what this looked like in the public life between the 1950s and 1930s was there were parades, cross burnings, charity drives, and school programs that normalized the image of the Klan as respectable. And its true purpose remained terror and exclusion throughout this whole entire time.
I am so sorry I cannot get off this one topic.
Yeah.
I understand that the cross burning came from the Birth of a Nation movie. How is that not a problem for these religious people? Doesn't that seem like very not okay?
So the way that it's depicted in the movie is that it is like purification and like light. It versus like
okay, so set yourself
blasphemous. On fire. Right? What is that called? Where you
like autoflagellation.
It's like whenever you light yourself on fire, it's like a form of
do that.
Yeah. Well, I can say a lot there. So, do you remember the first episode where you mentioned something about an MLM? And I was like, ooh, this is
Yes.
significant because, okay, I'm going to tell a little backstory as to how I got even to talking about the KKK. I have another episode that I'm going to do on modern day spiritualism in our country. And I traced something back and it has roots in MLM. And the time, I was doing this in tandem, basically. And the way that I was recognizing that as the Klan was growing at this time and it became this like very large organization, it sounded a lot like an MLM. And I was like, wait, this is really interesting. So they would go door to door. We're going to talk a little bit about the structure, but first we're going to get into recruitment and dues. The joining fee, there was a joining fee to get into the KKK. It would be about $150 in today's money and
Wow.
$10 back then.
A year or a month, do you know?
That was just the joining fee. That's just your one-time deposit to get into the KKK. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that was just the joining fee. Yeah. So the annual dues were between $5 and $12 at that time. Okay. This is not funny.
I think we're allowed to laugh at the absurdity.
It's absurd. It's absurd.
Because like nothing I'm laughing at or making jokes about is because like, oh, I'm having fun.
No,
it's because I'm like, are you serious?
It's fucking absurd. So the hierarchy, we're going to get into that a little bit, and then we're going to continue with the funding because this is important. So the hierarchy was modeled after fraternal order and pyramid sales at the time. There are the main person is called, and I'm going to go over these words again. You people who are listening, you've probably heard some of these terms, but again, important through thread here is that absurdity is the vehicle to permissive violence, right? So the national head is called the Imperial Wizard. The state leader is called the Grand Dragon.
Yes.
The district leader is called the Great Titan. The local chapter head is called the Exalted Cyclops. And the recruiter and sales agent is called the Kleagle.
So, I had heard all of those except for Kleagle.
So that
because it sounds like Kegel.
It sounds like Kegel, and you would remember that. Exactly. That's the first thing I thought. I was like, that's interesting. So the Kleagle would go door to door, and they were the recruiter and the sales agent. So they pocketed $4 for every $10 initiation fee, and the rest went up the chain straight to the top.
It is an MLM.
It's literally the OG MLM. It is the original MLM. With millions of people joining, this created massive revenue, an estimated $25 million in the 1920s, which is equivalent to hundreds of millions of dollars today.
I'm going to ask a question. And it's okay if you don't know the answer, but I am genuinely curious. Do you know what the tax situation was with this sort of setup?
Oh, that's a great question.
Well, I'm just curious because there at this point are now elements of faith, but it's obviously not a church. Mm-hmm. It's an organization, but it's a for-profit organization. So were they paying taxes? This does not have to be for the episode. I'm just like genuinely, what's up?
To answer your question, during the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan operated largely without paying the federal income taxes by claiming to be a tax-exempt fraternal organization similar to the Masons. It was not shut down due to tax evasion until the 1940s, after the group's influence had already declined. It's
just worse at every turn.
It just keeps getting worse and worse. So, and we'll get into a little bit more of the collapse. We're going to talk about the different. I mean, it dies and is reborn again multiple times.
This is going to be a 4-parter.
I know it is. Yeah, bear with me. So we're not getting too deep into the last resurgence. We're just briefly touching on it.
It's fine,
and that may or may not be because it's still currently active.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into a little bit of merchandising and branding. Members ordered robes, hoods, and paraphernalia from Klan catalogs. Everything from rings to flags to stationery, Bibles, and even child-sized costumes. Catalogs promised quality, American-made, pure garments. Specialized companies like Columbia Manufacturing Co. and Klan Robe Incorporated mass-produced regalia. Ads often invoked moral virtue, the robe of righteousness, and the uniforms of purity.
I don't like that I tried to add levity by saying, oh, the entry fee was how they got their robe. And actually, there are catalogs.
Yeah, you have to pay for your robes. I mean, if this is not the manifestation of exploitative, like it's like inception. Like you're being exploited because of your hate,
This is
and then instilling more exploitation culturally for people of color, and for literally at this point Catholics, Jews,
this is such a scary
women.
cult. And it's funny that people talk so much about like the Masons, and the Masons are so creepy and what are the Masons doing? And it's like, meanwhile, you
Hello, they're
guys,
out here in the open.
with catalogs, you guys,
And
ordering like senior rings.
yes.
I'd be so curious to know what became of those manufacturing companies and what they are now called, because I bet they still exist. And I bet that they are still making things, and we should probably find out who they are and not support them.
You know what I just realized? Columbia Manufacturing Company, is that not the same
Columbia?
I don't think
That's
so.
what I hope not, but I will not be surprised.
Well, I don't think that it is. I don't want to spread misinformation here. Yeah, America's finest school furniture. That may or may not be it. Who knows? Columbia Manufacturing Incorporated is a company located. It was founded in 1877 in Westfield, Massachusetts. Chairs, desks, and other materials in education. That can't be it. There's a lot of companies by the name of Columbia Manufacturing. I mean, so many. Hardware. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna look more into this because now I'm really curious. Well, I really, I mean, maybe Clan Robe Incorporated is still around, but at this point, who knows? I was gonna make a joke about. No, I'm not gonna say that. Okay. So the Klan was an early example of how ideology was monetized. This is like really one of the first renditions, and still even to this day, it's this monetizing hate. Members were consumers, and belonging was sold as a subscription. Their structure exploited working class white insecurity while enriching elite clan leaders. Members paid to feel superior, and that false status is what kept them loyal. So, again, we're only in the second rendition here. So, this is through up until 1925, some things went down. Some further things went down. So, mind you, this whole view of the Klan is Christianity, Protestantism, the white American family. In 1925, Indiana Grand Dragon D.C. Stevenson was convicted for the rape and murder of a young woman, and it exposed the hypocrisy of the Klan's moral purity. So, this led to journalists uncovering financial fraud, which is what you were already getting curious about, and extortion schemes. Membership declined sharply, and by the 1930s, the network of influence persisted in police departments and courts and civic groups. The movement's ideology, white Christian nationalism, remained politically viable even as all of the hoods disappeared. So again, we see this death where the hoods are removed. It's not as prideful to be out in public with your hood on and your robe and doing family events in the name of the Klan, but it goes into hiding, and it's now it still has its roots in judicial systems, in our government bodies, and in our police. So the third and last resurgence that we'll talk about was through until around post-World War II, 1970s era. The Klan reemerges in opposition to civil rights. So after World War II, Black veterans returned home demanding equality. And this then activated this white backlash. So the Klan reorganized into smaller, more militant cells aligned with segregationist politicians. The campaign of terror begins: church bombings, assassinations, cross burnings near activists' homes. This is when our first episode comes in to play. So the murder of Harry and Harriet Moore in 1951 fits directly into this resurgence. So this is where we see episode 1 then enter here. Its importance in that the Klan's shift from mass membership to violent enforcement, that the bombing and them dying really is this manifestation of this shift from millions and millions of people nationwide into violent reinforcement. And religious justification deepened through Christian identity and theology. They claimed that white people were God's chosen race, and they framed violence as a divine duty.
So God created a son who was not his chosen race.
Who was a
And
man of color, by the way.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, exactly, literally, exactly.
okay, so God's own son was not okay. All right, that's all. I'm okay.
So the civil rights era forced federal confrontation, but it did not end the ideology. So there's all of this, again, like this fluff up of all of this violence. This was difficult to read. I did not
This
know
all
this.
hasn't been difficult. It gets worse.
Yes, it gets worse. So the global echo of this resurgence post World War II and into the 1970s and into today, American racism became an international blueprint. Nazi Germany explicitly studied American Jim Crow laws, segregation, and eugenics to draft the Nuremberg Laws. The shared obsession with purity, bloodline, and belonging is very important here. Post-war neo-Nazi and Klan groups merged, exchanging members and rhetoric under banners of white power and heritage. Today's hate movements, online and political, still draw from these intertwined roots. And that is where we conclude this historical review of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, that is so upsetting, but it also really makes a lot of sense as to why you have so many ignorant people now that are Holocaust deniers. When you're like, oh, okay, copy that. I get it,
So I stopped here. I could do a whole nother episode on the continuation through the 70s, the 80s, the intense, real, and unfathomable violence that has still persisted to this day. I encourage everybody to go watch the documentary that is linked in the show notes. It's a two-part documentary. It's like a mini docu-series, and it goes through this historical context, and especially the second episode of the documentary. It explores from this post-World War II, 1970s up until today in current times. And I feel like some of the most important parts to kind of root and ground in here, I added some like reflective curiosities and that really kind of tie this together with one of the main things that we always talk about, right, is this convergence of belief and fear. And the Klan's longevity shows that myth is more powerful than fact when it is tied to belonging. And that religion gave violence moral cover and nationalism made it patriotic. Something that was really strong through this whole overview is this concept of patriotism. And that the Klan's myth promised purity but delivered fear of losing dominance, fear of losing equality, and fear of facing history. It thrived because it met emotional needs to belong, to feel righteous, to feel safe, and in control. And we could keep going. There are many, when I tell you this is just the trunk of the tree, I mean, there are an unbelievable amount of offshoots, branches, further things to discuss. And I really do think that so much of what things that we've already covered on here, and then I'm sure in future episodes, you can see the tree more and more clearly the more I learn, Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think usually at the end of an episode, this is when we like kind of talk about it again, kind of tear it down, sometimes repeat ourselves, ramble for a while. And I just think that like, I don't have any of that, I mean, granted, I also interrupted you a shit ton during this episode to say a lot of those things,
which I liked,
but I mean, I really do think like this is one where I think we just say thanks and sit with it and I mean, there are a lot of pieces of this. Most of the pieces of this were not new. Certainly none of them were, well, there are a couple things actually were surprising.
Yeah, there were a couple things that I had never heard, which is what shocked me the most, is that I had never heard it before,
Yeah. But But I think to one of your later points of that, though it had many resurgences, it's not it in and of itself is not history. It is still happening.
Yes.
And, Jerry and I in the last episode talked about how it happened very close to us. We've witnessed it firsthand. Like we've seen a family member was handed a business card. I talked about that. Like it's from the Grand Dragon. Like that's not, it's still there. It's still here. It's still, they walk among us. Right. And it's disappointing and it's upsetting. And that's all I have,
Yeah, I think one of the most important things here is this. I the discomfort that it brings is, like I said in the front from the get, sit in the discomfort, and the curiosity is like the bridge out of that. Sitting with the depth, sitting with the weight, sitting with the heaviness and the discomfort, especially if you're someone, and I'm specifically speaking to people who are white here. It's a much different conversation to have with someone who is a person of color or is a part of a marginalized group who experiences the ramifications of this violence today. It sitting with the discomfort, yes, but then I encourage curiosity to be a catalyst of sorts, a segue, right? Like sitting with it is like the first layer or step. And then I've seen this, and this may just be my pattern recognition. I've seen it. That's where people will stay and be like, I'm doing the work. I'm sitting in the discomfort. And it's like, that is only just the beginning. And
yeah.
So I have only ever seen curiosity be a conduit to change. And I have only had one Black professor in my life, and it was during 2020, which was so just, of course, impactful. And I remember he asked us a question in class, and of course, we're all virtual. And we sat in silence and didn't say anything. And he looked at us and he said, I need you to remember this. Your fear of saying the wrong thing is you being complicit. And I was like, oh, woo, okay. So, and he's like, it is better to be wrong and corrected than to never say anything at all.
Well, and I think, if it's okay to say for you, you're white passing. I'm white. And I know that I think both of us have certainly had those moments where it's like, I definitely care, but I don't want to care the wrong way.
Yes,
or I don't want to say something and it seems inauthentic.
Or
I don't want to say,
yeah, I wasn't going to do this episode because I was like, I don't want to.
Who are we to talk about the history of the Klan? Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is I kept finding myself going, let's reroute into why we're doing this, right? Like we're not just like highlighting the KKK for like, because that seemed important. It's like, if our whole goal is to talk about belief
and fear
and how sometimes belief can be detrimental, right? How could you not do this? And I think that you did such a good job of first highlighting the humans that were directly killed because of this belief.
Two of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Yeah.
Well, and I was just going to say that I think what I also would invite anyone listening who is more kind of who I referenced earlier of maybe going, this isn't, I don't know, any of those feelings, perhaps just start with a little empathy. If you've ever found yourself feeling like any person of color has ever been stuck in the past, if you've ever kind of had that feeling of like, that was a long time ago. Nothing is behind anyone. Nothing is put away and tied up and dusted. This is all ongoing. And just like Jerry highlighted, it's just occasionally quieter now. They don't have catalogs. They're not going door to door. They still exist.
They just don't have hoods on. And with that, we bid you a gentle evening.
Mm-hmm.
Be
Yeah.
gentle. Really, again, inviting curiosity to be a conduit of sorts. And Heather and I will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.